see the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
Good morning and welcome to Artifact Live, where we look at the art and science of storytelling with me, Scott MacArthur. Episode 38. We're almost at 40. Does that mean I'm becoming a middle-aged vlogger? Can't believe it's been going on for so long, and equally I can't believe the response we've had over the last few weeks. In particular, it's been fantastic. So as always, if you're joining us for the first time, please pop your name and your location into the chat. If you're joining us from the Empathy Engine Facebook group, now Scott's just got to find it. I'll put this on the screen. There we are. Click on the little link that's in the Facebook group that you can see on the screen just now, and that will make sure that your name and your location is quite clear in the chat. So I hope you, well, from the feedback I've had, you enjoyed last week, and so did I. I mean, it was a real interesting conversation that Ewan Morrison and I had about the whole topic of storytelling and how one finds one's stories. And Ewan's real focus, and I've subsequently continued the conversation with Ewan, is about doing exactly what I say to everybody that we should be doing, as Indiana Jones here does, where we should be archaeologists of our own life, going back and taking those things into the present and sharing those with our friends, family and colleagues. It's been, again, interesting this week from that perspective, because I told the very sad story of my friend Tom, who died last week and whose grandfather made this violin. And really weirdly, just this morning, my partner, Samantha, got an email from America about her parents and about a story that she didn't know about. So these stories are all round about us, and I genuinely do think trying to capture them is critically important. And to remind you what I do, I'm not saying it would work for you, I do 2 or 3 things. One, for one of my great heroes, Tony Benn, the Labour Party activist and politician, was a great one for recording his diary every day in an old tape recorder with the 2 buttons he used to press down in the old microphone. And 30 years ago, I started to do the same thing, initially on the old dictaphone, but now on one of these gizmos. And I think that has, well, I know that has proven to be incredibly useful for me throughout my career, and when I started to become a professional speaker. And indeed, my guest today, Tony, who I'm going to introduce in a minute, I reminded myself of when I first met Tony just by using my audio recording the other day. So that's the one thing I do. The second thing I do is, and this is really quite old-fashioned, I know, but I have a spreadsheet on this laptop, and I've basically got all the years since I was born on there. Then I have a row of events that happened in each of those years. Then underneath that, I've got my own little stories. Some of them are just 1 or 2 words, 1 or 2 lines, sorry. Some of them are significant parts of my life. And I find that linking it to an event not only triggers your memory about where you were, because the older you get, I find it the harder it is to remember, when things actually happened, or I get them muddled up. But if I say, the year Lady Diana died, or the year, Back in Black was #1 in the charts, or whatever, any of these things helps me remember where I was at any one point, and then I can try and remember my stories and write them down. So that's how I do it. It'll be really interesting to see how Tony Brassington does it today, because Tony, who I'll bring on in a sec, the reason I asked him, there's 2 reasons. One is, I met him on the Red Dot in the TEDx Telford event, and I really was quite beguiled by his topic, and I'll ask Tony to talk about that. But so that was the first thing. But the second thing is this guy, a bit like you in last week, is able to put his story tendrils into all sorts of places. The roots of his stories are across the domains, and that's actually quite unusual. And I think the richness that can bring, particularly to a storyteller, is well, it's fantastic. Oftentimes I'm told you need to have a deeper niche. Well, I'm not sure about that. And maybe Tony and I can have a chat about that. But so that's the context of today. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll just check the chat, see if anybody's new in at all. No, good morning, everybody. Thanks for saying good morning. No, we're okay. Right, I'll get Tony on now. Right, Tony, I'm going to switch it on. There you go. You're on. Oh, no, that's not working. There we go. You're on now. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning, Scott.
Welcome to the show. Thanks very much for coming.
Great to be here.
Yeah. Can you believe it's been a few years now since we met?
Yeah,
it's stage.
Going by.
Yeah. What's your memory of that day?
Well, I've done quite a bit of public speaking, so it was just a very nice, enjoyable event.
Yeah.
The audience was a nice vibe and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So many interesting talks, which is what makes TEDx stand out. So many interesting characters.
Yes. Yes.
And yeah, interaction with the audience after your talk as well. So no, it's all good. It's all good.
So tell my audience what it is you do. What is your main focus of your activities, Tony? What do you do for a living, etc.?
I'm in both worlds at the moment. I am a mechanical engineer in my day job, and then I am very busy as an author. I seem to be writing an increasing number of books year on year, which is amazes me. You seem to be the more you write, the easier it gets, as you can imagine.
Right.
Yeah.
And your day job, you say you're an engineer. What sort of engineering do you do? Sorry.
Well, I repair forklift trucks.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So actually, interestingly, all of my life, I've either been repairing things or driving them.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. But when I was about 40, eventually I got a bit fed up of listening to the radio and stuff as I was driving around, and I started playing audio books. And when I stumbled across one almost quite by accident about goal setting and stuff, and I'd always thought big and set goals right since my teens.
Yes.
So I remember looking at this book thinking, well, what can this guy teach me? But luckily I was more open-minded and I tried it. And he really spoke my language, and he got me looking at this whole area in a lot more detail. In no time at all, I had, tens of these audio books, all the big names of the day, including Zig Ziglar's and Brian Tracy and
right, okay,
all the rest of them. So I've had a really good education as I've been driving around at the same time.
Yes.
And you also marry that up with the fact that I'm driving to lots of different businesses, so you see how lots of people how they earn their living, how they apply their trade. You see people succeeding and you see people failing.
Yeah.
You sometimes see a new manager come on site and you think, yeah, you've got about 6 months before this place shuts. You get quite a good perception.
Yes.
And I think that it takes time to build up this wide collective knowledge, but stuff like that all feeds into it.
Mm-hmm. So I'm very interested in your the way you've garnered and gathered your knowledge through the audiobook world, because that is significantly what I did as well, believe it or not. I mean, I did a bit more traditional university, then went on to jobs, but then I think I was in my 30s when I discovered an online platform where you could, because I didn't have any money, so we used to have to get these books from the library or from online. And I've discovered this platform, still use it occasionally, called Easy News, which is basically a news group trawler where you can just download all the books.
Yeah.
And I did exactly the same because I was in consulting and I ended up traveling a lot, and I always had these things in my ears. And it's amazing over the years how much you can get into your head, isn't it? That's amazing.
Yeah.
So do you still do that, or have you moved on to something else, or do you still listen to books? Or
I'm listening. I've listened to a lot of the personal development stuff for probably a decade. And when The Secret came out and the Law of Attraction, I did a great deal of listening to that. And things like The Stranger's Secret by Earl Nightingale, I could play it and play it and play it. From the first time I heard it, I knew it was special.
Yeah.
And I was pleased to hear Bob Proctor say that that's how he was when he first heard it. He played Earl Nightingale's The Stranger's Secret just for years.
Right.
And Think and Grow Rich is another one. I mean, I won't say I know it word for word, but I've heard it enough times that I should do. But you've also got to go wider than that. You've also got to look at what a human being is and what our history is and things, because as a species, we don't really understand each other. Nobody can even give you an accurate age for the human race.
Yes.
So things like I think Many Lives, Many Masters by Brian Weiss.
Right.
That's a great one about past life experiences. Joseph Campbell's all of his books looking at the history of religions. So I think you've got to go quite a lot wider and we've got this strong spiritual thing within us, and it dictates a lot of what we do. We don't really understand where it comes from or what's pulling our strings, so it's good to go as wide as you can with it all, I think.
So given that, and given your background, why on earth should anybody, not just have the stories in their heads? Why should they start to write them down? Why write a book? What should people be thinking about if they're thinking about writing a book?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think there's 4 reasons for writing a book. Well, you might say there's 3 reasons, and there's a 4th reason that stands on its own or can fit in with the other 3. The first reason, they sometimes call it the vanity publishing, which is a bit of a harsh term, perhaps.
Yeah.
Where you're writing a book just for yourself and for your family members and things, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can put whatever content in that you want. It's entirely for you. And once you've done it, you've achieved something that so many people will never achieve. The second time of reason to write a book is for the business card, where you write this book, which is very much full of your content and what you want to put across, but it also considers the customer and what you can do for it, him or her. And that book needs to be fairly thick, nice gaps in the paragraphs and all that thing. So you use lots of pages. So when it hits the desk, it's got a nice FUD factor. And then the third reason is a commercial book, which it's great writing from the heart. But if you actually want to earn a living from books, you need to study what you need to do to make your books work commercially. And the 4th reason is channeled, where people sometimes get a book that's totally channeled. It's almost like in a different voice to their own altogether, and the content occasionally isn't even stuff they know. But the channel thing can be, where do thoughts and ideas come from? So that, the channel thing can actually be amongst all of the other book descriptions, the reasons for wanting to write them.
Okay, and so do you actively sit down and decide what type of book am I going to write in your process? Because I know people are, I'm fascinated what you said earlier about the more you write, the more you write. We'll come back to that definitely. But do you sit down and go, right, this book's going to be a commercial book, this book's going to be a vanity book? What's your process? I'd love to understand that.
Right. Okay. I think I look which type of book it is after I got the concept of the book. I'm somebody that gets ideas, and I've always got the dictaphone by the side of me. It's different with the phone now, because you've always got a notepad on the phone or the dictaphone. You've always got something with you.
Yes.
But even if it's the middle of the night, I'll get up, I'll go downstairs, I'll jot something down. If I get an idea for a book, the concept for a story,
yes,
if I get a scenario
Yeah.
that's just interesting, that if filled out would make a fascinating story. So I build up this list of possible book titles. I've usually got titles that pretty much hint at the story or the content.
Yes.
And I've usually got 2 or 3 paragraphs.
Yes.
And with a story, I nearly always know where it starts and I know where it finishes.
Right. Okay.
And then in my folder of books on my laptop, the top 10 ones that I'm likely to work on next, I number those and I shuffle the order from time to time. Some things might go up, some things might go down.
Okay. Okay. So if you're, I mean, this is really interesting because I'll need to get you to explain how many books you've written and on the topics in a minute, so it gives it a context. But if you do your, I guess it's like a river, the source of your stories, you know, is that serendipitous or is it from experience? You know, where does the kernel come, the seed, or does it just come to you? You know, where does it start? The very, very start of it, Tony.
Okay, there's probably a number of answers to that. I'm quite interested in the goal setting. I've got a business called Mind and Achievement, and I've had big dreams and goals ever since I was young, and for a long time they were quite elusive. I could do really well in all kinds of areas of life, but a certain area of goals I struggled with for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I was about 13, 14, asking questions of those around me: how do I achieve it? How do I get to where I want to be with a certain group of goals? And I couldn't find anybody that could give me answers.
Right.
Which is why when I found that audio book about goal setting, because if you go back like 15 years ago, it wasn't as well known, the audio books thing, as it is today. And if you go back to my childhood, it was virtually non-existent back then.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always been quite driven by those answers, that area of knowledge that we all should have, that we all should have been taught, that the information's there. And I feel we all should have better access to that, because also therefore all of the books that I write, even when I write things about like the Carpenter's Puck Group, there's still stuff in there which is about setting your mind to achieve things. There's still stuff in there about understanding goal setting and motivation and real life application. Yeah. Okay.
So when you here's a picture of your book about the Carpenters. Were they a band that you liked before, or did you just become curious about? Obviously, the story is very interesting. What was the motivation?
Well, when I was, I think it was about 9, the very first album I was ever given was for my 9th birthday, and it was the Carpenters, the singles 69 to 73. Now they did all kinds of amazing, really good albums. But that, if I could only have one album, it'd have to be that one.
Right.
I mean, Karen's voice is just, it's an absolutely amazing voice. When there are people that could talk about that voice for hours on end.
Yeah.
When I wrote interviews with Carpenter's tribute acts, that's full of so many aspects of her voice that these tribute acts were describing every nuance and detail. So both Richard and Karen Carpenter were 2 extremely talented people. They were they're geniuses. So any amount of time, either studying, writing, or listening, or whatever about geniuses is certainly time well spent, because they had some exceptional results. Yes. The album I was just talking about was the best-selling album in the 70s at one point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And to go back to where we started that conversation, because I'm trying to get into your psyche here. You get an idea that might be from a goal or for something else, and you said you then went keep me right, Tony, if I've got it wrong, but you then have an ending. You've got. I'm assuming this is this for your non-fiction and your fictional writing, or is it just for the fiction?
Yeah, the fiction, because like the Carpenter's books were both, in a sense, they were quite practical.
Yeah.
Because the second book, the music survey, is obviously following a list of questions. So from a survey, so it obviously starts at one end and you follow it through to the other.
Yes.
The interviews with Carpenter's Tribute Acts is a quite different kind of book. I once read a series of books called Stock Market Wizards,
right,
by an American author. Absolutely fantastic books, because when I was struggling with my goals and stuff, and I didn't have as much business knowledge, listening to reading these interviews with the stock market traders and things was surprisingly helpful.
Right.
And it also had this parallel with personal development, which the author acknowledged, you know, and they were fascinating. So I always wanted to do an interview type book. So like I say, you end up with 7 interviews. So you've got a start to the book saying what the book's about. You've got 7 interviews, and then you draw a conclusion.
Right. Okay. So,
and yeah.
Okay. And sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that on the Carpenter's one, interestingly, that I mentioned at the start reasons to write a book. That was almost like the one that had that sort of channeled quality, because that was the one where I had no intention of writing any of the Carpenter's books. I just kept getting so many ideas about that. The first one, the Carpenter's My Reflections, I just kept writing them down. You know, if it come to me in the middle of the night, first thing in the morning, last thing at night, I just write them down. I got so much stuff in the end. I thought, well, you've got to write it into a book.
Yes.
So I just did that one. It was just a one-off. It was a little bit perhaps self-indulgent as far as I could see. I couldn't see how it fitted with my main area of work with Mind and Achievement.
Yeah.
But I did it, and then I'm lying on a beach a couple of years later, and I thought, hang on, we could do a bit more with this. And I liked the survey idea, and I liked the interview idea because it tied in with that stock market traders books. And I had a bunch of other ideas, and some just made me laugh out loud. I thought, you can't do that. But there was see, one of the things is with the Richard and Karen Carpenter, you've obviously got her anorexia thing, and there's a bit of a witch hunt going on. People are pointing, trying to put the blame. So none of my books have got any of that. It's all done to death, and you know, they're best placed people to write about such things. So I know there's a lot of interest in it. I know there's fans hungry for something else. So I just tried to bring something new to the party, which I think I did. All 3 books, very different, but strong common link.
Yes, love it. So if and I'm sorry, I'm going to get really anal here. You've got a start and an end.
Yes.
And this is probably more for your fiction rather than your non-fiction.
Yeah.
How does one go about filling in the gaps? Because I mean, it's like, I mean, I've got ideas for books, fiction books, and I've written short stories, and I've published some, and I've published a book, and you know, I've done all that. But I sit down sometimes and think, yeah, it's a good idea. It's quite a good ending. How am I going to fill the gap? You know, the 300 words between the two. How do you go about that?
Right. Well, you it helps. I'm not pointing at anybody, but it helps if you've got a lot of life experience. You know, been places, done things. Sometimes not everybody can, but they explore the world because they've read it in books.
Yes.
There's, I think, a good way to throw some light on what you're searching for is to explain the book that I'm writing next in my Well Travelled Book series.
Okay.
Some years ago, we were on holiday in Ibiza, and there was this young lady working on the door in the restaurant. It was the first day on this job, and she was trying to invite people in to get them to have a meal and things. And we just got talking to her, and she was one of these sort of restless souls that would couldn't settle. She always had to be leaving the country. She always had to be working abroad. She always had to be, you know, not at home at a steady job, that kind of thing.
Yes.
And I was listening to her, and I thought, you know, you're fascinating. You know, what's behind that? Is it a troubled soul? Is it a restless soul? Is it someone that just wants to see the world? So I've got the next book I write in the Well Traveled book series is called The Ridgeway, which is Britain's oldest road. It's about 90 miles long. Me and my wife walked it about 3 years ago.
What's it called again? The Ridge? Is it the Ridgeway?
The Ridgeway. Yeah. It starts off at Avebury Stone Circle, Europe's largest stone circle, passes a load of chalk white horses, goes through woodland and all kinds of places. It's an amazing walk. So I always wanted to write a book on that. Right. So you got the start of the book. I can quite see how that starts. I've got a girl working on a cruise ship. The cruise ship's coming into port, and she's finishing her tour of duty, whatever. She was working on the entertainment there. But so she should be going straight home to her parents. But she stumbles across one of the books, the walking guide books for this walk. So she decides she's going to walk the Ridgeway and then go home. So I've got an end point. I can see how this is going to work, and it will explain her character, and there'll be a separate sort of other main character which will sort of tie in. And by the time they get to the final chapter, they will both have a better understanding of who they are and why they do certain things.
Okay. And
I like to get quite a big finish on my stories. So if they were, I can imagine them if they were set to film. Oh, look at that. Yeah, imagine if they were set to film, what a big finish would look like. So in the case of the Ridgeway, I've got a beginning and I've got an end. But the walk itself is 6 days. So there's 6 chapters, different parts of the walk. Now, a walk might not be that interesting on its own, but you can add lots of characters that she meets each day. Yes. And as you go along, they're all sort of hinting and pointing to something that's going to happen farther on.
Do you, I mean, that you can guess what's coming to my head. I've got the Wizard of Oz going through my head. You know, the characters and the and I guess there's all the books about the Camino de Santiago. You know, the Camino books as well that are. But that sounds amazing. I love the fact that you. I mean, it sounds really simple, but I assure you, if you're watching this, it's not to actually come up with a structure. Because I know I've tried. I did it once, Tony, where I had I got a book deal and we were going to write this book, and I had basically it was 150,000 words, and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote, and I didn't like it. Yeah. Right. I didn't fall in love with my own book. And I think what the mistake I made, it wasn't content was my problem. It was probably, and it sounds really weird, but it was probably this, what you've just said. It's probably structure that was my problem. Not the structure of story as such, which we could come on to actually, but more about the structure of the actual book itself. You know, I think that was my, and to some that might seem simple, but I didn't find it simple, Tony.
No. See, one of the things I like to do is to put lots of layers within it. So you've got your main characters, you've got the setting, which the setting has a lot to do with helping to fill in the chapters. So obviously on the walk you've got six different days.
Yes.
What was the question again? Sorry.
Don't worry, no, I was just talking about structure really, and about how to help people who are watching today, because I think it's right to say, it'd be daft if it wasn't the case. Everyone's experience of this is different. You know, I don't think any two people are going to have the same experience of writing. Does that resonate with other authors that you speak to?
Yeah. You see, there are like two types of writers. There are people that plan out the start and the end, and sometimes every little bit along the way. And then there are those that sit down and write what comes to them each day, which is dangerous, because you could it's fine if it goes well, but you could paint yourself into a corner quite easily.
Yeah.
You could walk into writer's block big time if you haven't got an overview.
Right.
Yeah, you
That's
need. So if you've got a beginning and end, you've
Mhm.
got your main characters, you've got a setting,
Yeah.
and then, like I say, I've got layers. So there's always the goal setting thing. I've got this interest in ancient stone, you know, mankind's real history that's long lost. We don't know nothing about ourselves as a species.
Yes.
Nothing at all. And it's good. I tried to write these books so they lead you to ask questions or to think about some things in a different way, which all adds layers of interest. I hope.
So, I mean, one of the, I'll just show some of your books here. There's the ring that you wrote. Sorry, the resolution is not great on that photograph, but when you start writing and you have and you've really helpfully described that process. That's really good. How do you decide about depth? So, you know, if you read some writers, like the chap who wrote The Martian recently, and who it writes in very fine detail, and a lot of people don't like him because of that, but many more like him because of that. Then you have at the other end of the scale someone like Dan Brown, who's a bloody awful writer, but a fantastic storyteller. I mean, it's really weird how the different styles. How do you do it? How do you decide about if you're telling about a white horse, or about a character, or about a walk? How do you decide, or do you just let it flow? How do you approach that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's yeah, I'm somebody that's got lots of ideas. I've got an interesting wide collective range of things that I'm interested in. So that I don't really have a problem with the depth and the filling in the layers sort of thing. And it seems to just come naturally to me to do this interweaving thing. Because actually the first 4 books in the Well-Traveled book series, if you read them and then go back to the first one, you'll see there's so many pointers in the first book for stuff that's coming in the later ones.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you form connections between your books and your stories.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of that going on. You've got to be a bit careful with that, because, like I say, you could paint yourself into a corner. But like, there's a Well-Traveled book series. The first 10 books, I pretty much know where it's going. Yeah, I mean, that's the same as the stories, isn't it? The whole series, I've got an overview for it. Yeah, it might move on. Well, probably will move on to something different after 10.
Right.
Fresh ideas and fresh things.
How many books have you written, Tony?
I've the 2 that I've just registered will take me to about 12.
12, my goodness.
Yeah, there's two new ones coming out. I'm going to do a few short stories because I'm
right. Okay.
I'm a bit disillusioned with short stories, because I imagine you'd think it would be easy to write an interesting short story, and then you try and find a series of interesting short stories, and you won't get very far till you're ready to chuck the book.
Right. Okay.
It seems bizarre. Yeah.
Right.
Well, so I'm happy to have a go at trying to write some stories that, you know, have actually got something about them, but they're just still short.
Going to have a very quick break, Tony, but when we come back, I mean, this is fascinating. I'm really enjoying this. I'd like to talk, okay, we could talk all day just about the form, but let's talk about the process, you know, once you get to your first draft and publish it. I think we'll get to that because we're already more than halfway through the show here, way more than halfway through the show. So let me just have a quick break and then we'll come back and we'll see if we can get into that publishing thing, Tony, with you a little bit, because that to me is really interesting, isn't it, everybody? Really interesting. As always, I'd just like to take a quick break to remind you about some of the other activities that I'm involved in. And one of the key projects that I'm working on at the moment is to try and bring some structure to what we've done over the last 38 weeks. I mean, this is getting towards 3/4 of a year now. We're starting to, at least I feel we're starting to make real progress with, you know, the challenges of structure, the challenges of actually sitting down and writing a story, thinking about a story, presenting a story, using fiction, using fact. I mean, the list, as you know, goes on. So at the end of the month, I'm running a 1 hour event at the end of this month on storytelling, where I'm going to try to distill all the different themes that we've had on the show into 1 hour. Now, it's going to be tough, but thanks for those of you who already bought tickets. Tickets are available on Funzing, and I will put that up before the end of the show for you to have a look at if you're interested in. But I hope you've enjoyed so far with Tony. I've really enjoyed it because he's a very practical guy, isn't he? Maybe it's his engineering. Tony, you're listening to this. Maybe it's because he's an engineer. But it's very interesting that he's got that little structure. And even in half an hour, we're starting to see how this rather prolific author creates his books. So, Tony, welcome back.
Hello.
So let's talk about, okay, you've written a book. How many words make a book, incidentally? Is there a formula for that?
Well,
yeah.
the jury is always out on that. When I first started writing, I was told you should be trying to write 70,000 plus. Interestingly, I heard somebody say recently, because the way our habits have changed because of the internet, writing smaller, less words is probably better, because people don't have the time to, well, they're just used to, going on YouTube, 2-minute videos here, 2-minute videos there. So the mindset's a bit different.
Yes.
I think it stands to reason that the shorter you write the book, the better the chances of being read in full.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So depending on what you're aiming the book at, who you want to talk to and get the message across, if you're trying to share something with somebody, an audience that are busy people, you don't want to be doing a 6-volume book series. You want to be short, tight, and concise.
Yes, it's interesting because I spoke to a filmmaker about this, and what he said was something similar to what you've just said. Like back in the 70s and the 80s, when you didn't have access to films online as we have now, stories on audio books as we have now, he said the writing style had to be very different because people couldn't miss an episode, because if they did, they lost the story. But now when they write, and he's talking about screenwriters, which are obviously a similar but slightly different species of writer to a writer of books, the story arcs can be more complex because people can binge watch. They can always go back now, because yourself, if you missed an episode of something back in the 80s, you had to wait a year and a half to come back on the television, or you had to get, hopefully one of your friends had recorded it on one of those old clunky videotapes, So there must be, I think that's a really interesting, something to really think about. I might come back to that in a future show, actually. But just before,
actually, just to add to that,
my
wife's always watched Coronation Street. And to be absolutely fair to that show, you can miss a bunch of episodes, and you sit down to watch one, and you get back into it.
Yeah.
And like you've just said, that's not possible with so many things.
No, it's interesting.
And it was also interesting what you've said about older films, older stories. Yeah, I think the same's true with books. So you should never sort of forget the past. It's always worth revisiting some of the older books and films, and the best of them will stand the test of time. It's interesting with older books. You get some, and as old as they are, the language is as clear and accessible today as it was years back. And you get some others, and they're only decades old, and they're really hard work right over your head.
Yes. That could be a subject of a whole other episode, because one of the things that I get frustrated by, mainly in science, is how poor the writing is. The standard of the writing does go over people's heads, because they have for some reason it's maybe a form of armor or something, but they think they need to write a certain way because they are a certain type of person. And you don't need to do that. You just need to make it relatable and understandable, and then you'll get a bigger audience. But it's a big subject. I've got a couple of comments here I'd just like to take before we talk about your next step, if that's okay. Joe's saying, when Karen Carpenter sings, she sounds like she's singing directly to you. Yeah, an amazing voice, immortal. Well, I don't think you'll disagree with that, will you, Tony?
No.
She's it's interesting because I run a music live show on a Friday night about a venue in Scotland called the Glasgow Apollo, and a lot of the guys that are on there are, you know, old punks and rockers and mods and, you know, new romantics, but nearly all of them like the Carpenters.
Yeah.
You know, it's odd because, I mean, you wouldn't have thought it, but they do. And a lot of them are musicians, and obviously she was a good singer, but she's actually a very good drummer as well, wasn't she?
Yes. I mean, I like a wide range of music. You know, I love the classical music. Some of that stuff is just, absolutely brilliant.
Yes.
But like for me, over time, the Carpenters have been like a constant. Like a constant for me, sort of all the way, and I could go back to any album and play it at any time and listen happily to it. So much of the musical talent out there, you can only listen to it for a time, and then you need a break from it. You need something else. But the Carpenters are always, it's just good music.
Yes.
Going back to her voice and the comment somebody just said, she also had this amazing skill that you can play her music and it feels like she's singing just to you. It feels like she stood in the room with you. So talented, amazing.
There's another comment here. I'll read it to you rather than put it on the screen because it's quite a long one. It's from Doug. He says, "Hi, Scott and Tony. I love writing and have loads of ideas, but always have something else more pressing to do. Does storytelling necessarily need sacrifice of other parts of your life? And does it make for a better, more passionate story? Or are some people just born storysmiths who can juggle all of life's challenges while throwing out stories?" Whoa. I think there could be a whole episode on that one as well, Tony. What do you think of that from Doug?
Yeah. Well, so it sounds like he's got the ideas, but he's struggling to find the time to do it.
Yeah.
Right. So the best thing to do when it's like that is you just give yourself half an hour each day at a certain point in time. It's probably mornings to like get up half an hour earlier. If you are really short of time, you need to be reading some books about writing faster.
Right.
The fastest way to write, something I'm beginning to experiment with, but I haven't done that much of it, is to audio dictate, which is something that's getting increasingly easier now as technology advances. For argument's sake, you can record an audio file into your dictaphone. You can go on one of the file translation sites and have it put into a Word document, and then you just add your full stops and commas.
Yeah.
Or with your phone nowadays, usually in the notepad or the Word item or on Word itself, there's a speaker. Yeah. So you press that, you can audio dictate, and you will do more words per minute. So long as the ideas are ready to put out there onto paper, then in short half-hour bursts, day after day, you could be surprised what you could put together.
That's lovely advice. Thank you, Doug. I look forward to seeing your book. Tony and I would like to come to the book launch, please. So you've written the first draft.
Yeah.
And it's time to think about, getting this thing, bringing it to reality, bringing it into being. What do you do next? How do you take it to that next stage, Tony?
Well, actually, go back a bit. It was interesting what you said about you wrote this book and you didn't like it.
Yeah.
I haven't had that yet, but I imagine it must be a bit awkward or so I usually like what I'm writing because they come from my experience and knowledge and ideas and things, and usually you should sort of get a flow, and then you feel really happy, and when you've got a good one. Certainly like White Horses Live Forever and The Many Lovers of Henry Farmer, which isn't quite as the title suggests. Both of those books, I'd almost got a smile on my face as I was writing them. I was enjoying it so much. Yeah, and because I just knew the content within it was smack on and really engaging. So I think it's important to listen to that vibe within you And if you really didn't like a book, I think you'd probably have to think how far you take it.
Yes.
But at the same time, if you didn't like it, I think you should still complete it. There's a lot to be said, but whatever the size of the book, you start a project and you finish it.
Yeah. I think what I did, Tony, was I set out to write a book of, you know, helpful stories, if you like, in the business world.
Yeah.
But I ended up writing an academic book. I kept, as you said earlier, I kept backing myself into corners because I would, and this is probably because of my scientific training, because I would look at, like, I was doing basically end to end of the life cycle of a human being at work. So I would look at things like, you know, job description. Where did that start? So I went and researched that. So it started with a Scottish engineer in America building railroads during the Great Western, you know, atrocities when Europeans were killing all the Indians. Got interested in that. Then I found out there was a guy, and I kept going. Yeah. So I needed to have some sort of stop button. You know, I just couldn't stop myself. And then when I put it all together, there was 150,000 words. And it was just awful because it was just, there wasn't a thread. Well, there was a thread along the top, but each of them went too deep. You know, it just went too deep, and I wouldn't have read it. You know, I wouldn't have read it. So it was a wee challenge, I have to say. Publisher wasn't very happy, but I didn't want it. I didn't want it published.
Yeah,
I didn't want it published. Well, anyway, so how do you go then? So you've come to the end of the writing process, at least the first draft. What's next? What's next for you? How
so
you do it?
you do your first draft, and you should be happy with it to the point of quite liking it or being really excited about it. And I think if you're not feeling like that, then you haven't finished your first draft. You've got to go back and edit in or out whatever's causing you to feel not right about it. It's interesting, the singer Alanis Morissette. I'm going to one of her concerts later in the year if they ever stop moving the date.
Yeah.
Thanks to COVID. I heard her in an interview, and she's a very clever, well-read woman, and she's been writing a book, I believe. I once heard her say in an interview. So she wrote down all kinds of things. I forget what the word count, but it was massive. It clearly wasn't one book; it was 2, if not 3. And it sounded like it was so really eclectic, a chapter on this, a chapter on that, and it was all so diverse. And that's clearly a book that, as much as you like it, it needs splitting up, it needs breaking down. It didn't sound like one book. It sounded like something there's a number of books in there on certain subjects. It needed splitting. So I think it is possible to write something and you get to the end of the first draft and it can be not as envisaged. And certainly with characters, they can do that because you start writing the character and characters develop, because that's that channeling thing, you know, where do ideas come from?
Yes.
And you could get to the end of the book and something's different. It could be there's a minor character and you look at that minor character and that's a spin-off book because there's so much in it. That character's got certain qualities. They're stealing the show for some reason.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Are we off topics like another question still? Or?
No. This is fascinating. I'm loving this. Okay. So let's get back to the question again. How do you go from that final draft to having it available on Amazon?
So you get to the final draft.
Yeah.
The final draft should match your original objectives. You should have an understanding of the reason you wrote it. In my case, commercial stroke informative book with a little bit of channeling going on, perhaps. When you're happy with it, then you should always get professional proofreading, no matter who you are. Mm-hmm. You should always get professional proofreading, not just typos and that stuff, but people's fresh pair of eyes spot things, spot connections that you've missed or whatever. So That should always be done. Some professional editing, and then and then read through it yourself after it's stood for a couple of weeks. You know, get it all completed, get it wrapped up, take the mistakes out or errors, put it on the shelf for a couple of weeks, then come back to it and read it again with a fresh pair of eyes. If there's something you need to tweak a bit more, you do it at that point, and then it's time to get it published.
Yeah. And how do you go about that? How do you do it?
Well, in my case, I'm a Amazon KDP author. That's the platform I use.
Right.
Other people might be an established publishing house, but I'm happy with Amazon. It's the biggest publisher in the world, and Kindle's the second biggest publisher.
Yes.
So the process is fair. Once you've got the final copy, and then you need to get the final draft all edited and all the rest of it. Yes. Then it needs to be typeset so it all looks professional, nice layout and stuff.
Yes.
A tip. A big tip here is always start writing on the size document that the final book's going to be.
Right.
Yeah, because it makes the editing simpler, because you can't help it edit a little bit as you go along. There's no way to avoid it. But obviously, if you do it on a piece of on an A4 document, and that looks really nice, as soon as you put it into the book size that you actually want, it all changes.
Yes.
So you should always write it in a right size document to begin with.
Okay.
Yeah. And then it's basically when it's ready to publish, you put it into a PDF and upload it to Amazon.
Right.
Register.
And it's easy as that, is it easy as that on Amazon? Is it?
Amazon is, yeah.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Yeah. It's the old learning curve. The first one's the hardest.
Yes.
But once you've done it, it's quite easy. And there's so many educational videos on YouTube about how to do it if someone was struggling. But
yes.
there isn't really a problem as long as you got the formatting right, and it's a right size document, and you've got the professionally made book cover to the same size as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And how do you go about selecting the artwork? Because obviously, if it's online, if it's a digital copy, that I'm assuming, I might be wrong, but I'm assuming the artwork must be really important.
Yes. Artwork is it's crucial to a good book cover. But interestingly, I heard an author recently say he was done this absolutely fantastic professional image on the cover, full of detail and stuff like that. But when he started advertising the book online, it didn't work.
Right.
Because if you're selling from basically a thumbnail size, you need something that stands out, and small detail isn't going to work.
Right. Right. Okay.
So you need to think about book size. You've got the book in your hand, that's wonderful. You can see everything. When you're trying to sell digitally online, people are looking, a laptop's not so bad, but if they're looking on a phone or something like that, or it's something on an email, then they are seeing something much smaller and less detailed. So book covers they are what sells your book, but you do have to think in size as well. How would this look if it was really small? Would it still speak to me?
Right. And do you find then, and my final question, I see the time, sorry. But do you find that most of your readers buy the book, or do they use Kindle, or what's the what's the most, do you know what's more popular?
It's even across the two.
Is it?
I had, like a lot of authors, I had some reluctance about Kindle to start with, because my first Carpenter's book that was out there on Kindle, but the other two, the music survey one, that's not, because the formatting is much more challenging. If you have a thumb through the book, you'd soon see why. But I think I'm going to have to find a way to get that done. My feeling and understanding of Kindle is it greatly changed, and I'm reading more on Kindle myself, which I suppose helps my change opinion of it. But I think both they sell equally well in both camps. The advantage you do get with the Kindle is you can discount the book to 99 cents or pence, whatever, and you can really promote it, where a paperback book is always going to have a limit to how far you can bring it down, plus they've got to pay the postage.
Yes.
So if you really want to make a big hit and a big splash, you've got to have a really juicy Kindle book that you can wave in front of people. Look at this, 99p. You've got this small thumbnail that looks fantastic, and it's got this great title, and you're really going to want to read it.
Yeah, right, okay.
You can do things with Kindle that you cannot do with published traditional books. Right. I mean, it's true in both camps, isn't it? But the Kindle, especially the way the world's gone now, where it's all about online. You know, the days of sitting at the book signing to promote your books have gone.
Yes.
The world's a very different place. Yeah.
Have you ever had any of your books done as audiobooks? Given where you started, it would be a nice closing the circle, isn't it?
Yes, I that's been suggested to me on a number of times.
Yes.
It's coming, I think. Yeah.
Right. Who if you had infinite money and all the rest of it and time, who would you like? I like your own voice actually, but anyway, excluding you, who would be the person you'd want to read your books? Who would be the actor that you'd love to hear?
Well, if it was a Carpenter's book, it would have to be an American actor or actress, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Because the content is the Carpenters, but everybody's talking about Karen, it would probably have to be a female American voice.
Okay.
The well-travelled book series are all set down in Wiltshire and Bath in Somerset and the surrounding area, so you would need an English voice.
Yes. Right. Okay.
But the Scottish voice is an extremely good voice.
Well,
excellent public speakers in the Scottish accent.
Well, listen, Tony, that has been really, really fascinating. I think you could probably write a very interesting book about the writing process, Tony. That was in an hour. We've really packed in quite a bit there, haven't we? Because we've gone from where do the ideas come from? How do you structure a book? How do you then get the book to the point where you're happy with it? How do you then get it? We've done we haven't talked about marketing, but that's about the only thing we haven't really spoken about, apart from a little bit about thumbnails. But if there was anywhere that people could have a look at your work or could contact you, where would the best place be?
I've got a website, TonyBrassington.com. They can find me on Amazon, and I could. It's just come up there.
Yeah.
And I can share this link with you for the well-travelled book series.
All right. Okay. If you fire that over to me, I can put it up for people.
That will show that.
Right. Put that up. Hold on. Slightly fiddly on the system here, but I've managed to do it. There you go. Okay, so that'll appear on the YouTube channel and everybody else, Tony, so people can.
The advantage is with a surname like Brassington, there aren't that many of us, so you should be able to track me down.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for appearing on the show. It's been really nice to reacquaint ourselves together as well, because I know it was quite stressful at the TEDx experience, but we did get to chat, but probably not enough. But I would urge people, if they haven't seen Tony's TEDx, to have a look there on you. What was the title of it again? Can you remind me what the title was? Come on.
Oh, I don't know. It's something to do with Easter Island. Lessons from Easter Island.
That's right. Yeah, and I mean, it really. I mean, and as you see in the picture, he looked very, very sophisticated and suave that day. So, by all means, have a look at Tony's TEDx. Tony, thank you very, very much for appearing on Artifact Live. I do really appreciate it, and it was great to talk to you, mate. Thank you.
It's been great to do it.
Cheers now. Bye bye. So I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. You probably tell a big smile on my face. It was fascinating to hear a jobbing writer, a real storyteller who's doing it in the written format, telling us about and sharing with us his process. Absolutely fantastic. And I hope if you get a chance, if you enjoyed this, share it and make sure people who are maybe aspiring writers or blocked writers get Tony's wisdom, because there was a lot packed in there, wasn't there? There was a lot packed in there. So a couple of things before we finish. Why do I bother doing this show? Why do I bother with it? Well, I've said this, every time I say this, people go, that's a good idea. Well, I believe that a good story or a good book in Tony's case can act as an empathy engine. It can really help us understand other people. It can really help us understand other perspectives, people who are other to us. And it's all over the media just now, isn't it, about all these different groups and how we're all arguing with each other and we're all forming, I think, more and more cliques. I think stories are an anecdote to that. So not only are they an empathy engine, they're also an anecdote to that. But I think Tony epitomised this a bit like what happened last week with Ewan, that gathering your own stories is really important. And I genuinely believe that stories can change the world. So I really hope that you enjoyed this week's show. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I felt it was instructional as well as funny and fun. So thanks again, Tony. That was fantastic. So thanks for tuning in to Artifact Live, where we study the art and science of storytelling. My name is Scott MacArthur, and I'll see you next week at the same time. Thanks for tuning in.